Thank you for joining us this week for the County Executive's Weekly Briefing. I'm Nordea Lewis. As a reminder, this briefing is being recorded. Joining us today is Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich, the Director of the Department of Human Health Services, Dr. James Bridgers, County Health Executive Officer, Dr. Keisha Davis, Sean O'Donnell, Acting Health Deputy of Public Health Services, Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, and we have a special guest today, Maryland State Comptroller Brooke Learman. Just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded, and reporters, if you wish to record, please press the button. If you have questions, please raise your hand. Now with that, off to the County Executive.
Thank you very much on your first time doing this. And thank you everybody else for joining us. We're in the middle of Shop Maryland Tax-Free Week. It's a way to help families with the cost of school clothes, supplies, and backpacks if they shop between now and Saturday, August 19th. The incentives include tax-free purchases for qualifying apparel and footwear. Each item can't exceed $100. Sweaters, shirts, underwear, belts, shoes are examples of items that qualify. And the first $40 of a backpack or book bag is also tax-free. This promotion is unique in Maryland and not available in neighboring jurisdictions like DC or Northern Virginia. This is also good for our retail businesses in the county to attract shoppers from our neighbors to patronize their stores. Our families with limited means, these savings can really make a difference in how much money they're spending to send their kids back to school. And I appreciate that Comptroller Brooke Learman is joining me today to talk about Shop Maryland Tax-Free Week and also some of her strategic priorities as we move forward. So welcome, Brooke, and it's your show now.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. County Executive. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you all for your interest. We are now in the midst of Shop Maryland Tax-Free Week, and so we want to just get the word out to make sure that people know that this is the best week of the year, whether it's you need a wardrobe refresh or you're buying your kids uniforms or clothes for back to school. Every item that's $100 or less is tax-free, and the first $40 of backpacks is tax-free as well. And as the county executive said, in Virginia, DC do not have these promotions, so it's a great way for folks in those jurisdictions can come into our state. And of course, we are always partner with the Maryland Retailers Association and our small businesses around the state. This is a huge week for them. The summer can sometimes be a tough time for some of our businesses as people are traveling. But this week you can shop local and get that tax break. You can go buy some vintage clothes, you can buy new clothes, go to your local store so that you're not only saving dollars, but the dollars that you're spending are going to support our local economy, right? Going to support our neighbors and our communities. So I've been doing the rounds, reminding people that this is the week to shop, and really appreciate the county executive giving me an opportunity to be here today. Also, I wouldn't be the Maryland's revenue administrator if I didn't give you an update on tax season. We right now have processed in our office 3,090,000 tax returns. And we have issued over 1,970,000 refunds for a total amount of over $2.5 billion. So we are working quickly to get money out to people and encourage folks who haven't submitted to please file their returns so that we can work with them. We have a lot of work going on in the Office of the Comptroller. I am focused on modernizing our systems, bringing more transparency and accountability to our systems, and ensuring that the resources of our agency reach the people of Maryland. So excited to be here with all of you today, and I'm happy to take a few questions. Thank you.
We will now open it up for questions. You guys can raise your hand. We have Tom Fitzgerald. You have the floor.
Okay, maybe we'll come back to Tom.
All right, we'll move it on over to Scott.
Great. Hi, Madam Comptroller. It's Scott Broom, reporter at Channel 9 in Washington, WUSA 9. A couple things. Online shopping and whether or not that's going to be tax deductible in some way and how some of our audience might be able to do that. And secondly, there's this sort of school of thought that it gets kids really excited not to do online shopping, but to actually take them to the store. And that's just an observation. And I wonder if you have any thoughts you might want to share with people about helping kids build excitement by going to the store with them. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. So I will start by saying that you can shop online for items to receive that tax break. You have to purchase it this week, and the item also has to arrive this week. So you can't go online at 11:58 p.m. on Saturday and expect to get that tax break, because it also has to arrive this week as well. But look, I'm a Montgomery County Public School graduate, but I'm also the mom of 2 public school students right now in Baltimore City, and a 10-year-old. I have a rising 5th grader and a rising kindergartner. And we went shopping on Sunday to buy school uniforms, to buy their school supplies, to talk about what we need to do so that when they show up on the first day of school, they're ready to go and ready to learn. And I certainly think, we actually saw a number of families also out on Sunday, including some area families that will be going to the same school. So it definitely lends to the excitement and the understanding of the need to be prepared so that you can be fully ready to when school starts and you're ready to go on day 1. Thank you, Scott.
All right, we'll move it on over to Kelly.
Okay, just wanted to unmute myself. Thank you very much. Mr. Elrich, parents in Montgomery County are very concerned today about the sexual harassment allegations against Dr.
Actually, Kelly, we are going to save those questions to the very end. If anyone has questions about tax-free week specifically, feel free to go ahead and ask that.
Sorry.
You will get your question.
Yes.
Trophy, do you have a question about tax-free week?
Sorry, Tom, I need to say mine to the end too. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
All right, no problem. Does anyone else have any questions regarding this? Going once? Going twice? All right. Mr. County Executive, I will throw it back to you. And Comptroller Learman, thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to sign off if you want, or you could stay if you want. Up to you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Comptroller. And I really sympathize with the work you're doing, because I know you talked a lot about the state of the kind of equipment that the state was using when you came into office. And for many of us, I know local jurisdictions, issues about how long it took to get information and get access to data has been hampered, not by people who don't want to work, but by having technology that just did not facilitate the work that people were doing. And so I'm really happy to see you approaching that and trying to bring your department into the 21st century. I will not say we haven't been without our own struggles over the last years.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. And certainly all of the work we're doing on cannabis, on sales tax, on tax returns, all that processing is being done on COBOL and mainframes. So we have lots of work to do to modernize the agency, and I look forward to partnering with our local governments. So
absolutely. Thank you. So let's just start with the principal issue. I want to address the report that first surfaced on Friday in the Post about a high school principal who was accused of sexual harassment multiple times and subsequently reported. I think you know that, at least the last I heard, the principal's on leave. And according to the school system, they've hired an outside law firm to investigate. I had said earlier, I think the allegations are really concerning, and many questions about how the accusations were handled are really the big problem. I mean, people do things like this, and when they happen, they're bad, and we expect action. But I think the way this got handled is what's raised probably most of the concern in the community. Who was responsible for ensuring that these allegations are properly reviewed? And did the school system conduct reviews of the complaints before promoting this principal? I mean, if it's true that there were 6 complaints, I don't know how you make a promotion decision without clearing those complaints and reaching some conclusion about them. And if you're hiring somebody now to investigate What does that say about the investigations that were done previously? Or people might ask, were they done at all? Or were they not done right? So this has raised a lot of questions, and I'll note that Jennifer Martin from the Teachers Union has raised similar concerns that this is not the only time complaints of this nature have been not acted on. And I would hope that if the school system is bringing somebody in to actually investigate, that they actually look at it in a broader swath than just this one-off incident. Because it does us no good to have lingering questions about there whether this is typical or is this an aberration. One would hope it's an aberration, but that's, I think, needs to be put to rest. And if this is the catalyst for doing it, then we need to get it done. And the county government doesn't have authority over the schools, but we're all vested in getting the right resolution, because I hear from parents who want to know what I can do about this. And it's not satisfying just to say, wait for the schools to complete their investigation. You know, we know that we have thousands of dedicated staff who are working with our kids across the county, and staff deserves better. And like I said, I hope they get to the bottom of not just this, but if there's actually a broader look at how these things have been handled historically within the school system. And I think that what we all need is clarity on what's been normal and what's not normal. And I'll go on some other stuff. We'll come back and you guys can ask me those questions when I get to the end. This is National Farm Market Week, and our summer begins to reach its last few weeks now. And I want to remind everyone of the numerous farm markets that we have across our county. This is National Farmers Market Week. This year, there are 22 farmers markets in Montgomery County that the Office of Agriculture has communicated with and is aware of. They are searchable by visiting the Office of Agriculture website. And using farmers markets are important to our sustainability efforts. Much of our food is unnecessarily trucked over vast distances, contributing to emissions of greenhouse gases. By sourcing more food locally, we can reduce the carbon footprint of food. And so it also requires farmers to shift more of their production from commodity crops to table crops that can be consumed locally. But this is, you know, a multi-step process. Farmers have to develop local markets for their produce if they're going to be expected to shift into producing more produce. So we have work to do, but this is important work. And I know our food resiliency people are engaged in this. And how our food is produced also makes a significant environmental impact as well. But by attending these markets and speaking directly to the men and women that farm here, you can learn more about our local practices. By understanding production methods, you can choose foods with lower environmental footprints, for example, that are grown with sustainable or regenerative agricultural practices. It's pretty clear that farming is evolving. There's much greater sensitivity to the use of fertilizers and pesticides, and we see greater efforts to rebuild soil, use cover crops, maintain insect diversity. Not every insect is a bad insect. To use less pesticides and to create border areas for wildlife. All these practices contribute to the conservation of resources and the long-term viability of our local ecosystems. Another often overlooked aspect is the connection between local food sourcing and climate change and the reduction of food waste. When food is transported over long distances, it's more likely to spoil before reaching its destination. And if it hasn't spoiled by the time it got there, it often has a shorter shelf life. By sourcing food locally, we can reduce the time between harvest and consumption, minimizing the waste and the methane emissions that are associated with decomposing organic matter. And climate change is a pressing global issue. I don't know how anybody misses the news and doesn't get a sense of just how widespread and bad things are getting and how rapidly they're changing. I hope everybody remembers that it was, you know, a few years ago that people were talking about, oh, we got to 2050, maybe we've got to 2035, maybe we're not going to see anything until the 22nd century. All these things are happening faster and they're happening at a bigger scale than anybody talked about before. And some of the things that are happening are things that nobody talked about before. So we need to be aware, and what we do locally with choices, with our choices in terms of what we grow and what we buy here and what we sell here, all can be positive influences on the work we're trying to do in Montgomery County. We continue to forge ahead with our climate action plan and continue to support farming measures that are carbon neutral. Overall, by understanding the broader context and consequences of our everyday actions, we can make better decisions that collectively contribute to a more sustainable and resilient future. And again, we're going to be hearing a lot more about this because clearly there's no sign of climate change moderating anytime soon. We also have had very eventful county fair this year. Since it opened on Friday, at least 2 calves have been born on the fairgrounds. We have a new 4-H king and queen that have been named, and thousands of people have been out to enjoy the food, carnival animals, and entertainment. I went up there myself this weekend and had a chance to, visit the different stalls up there, watch some of the fundraising activities that were going on, and was just glad to see the large number of county residents and also some non-county residents who traveled to take part in this fair. Organizations like Montgomery County Farm Bureau and the Maryland Extension Service and many others participated to help make this fair successful. The county has 93,000 acres that are designated for farmland and rural open space in our ag reserve. That's about 1/4 of the land in Montgomery County. The reserve was conceived of more than 40 years ago to keep urban sprawl from moving too deep into land that was meant for farming and raising livestock. Innovative land planning was used to help get the most of the land preserved for our farmers. And more than 550 farms are working today, producing local fruits and vegetables, raising cows for dairy and meat, and now getting into local farm markets, grocery stores, and restaurants in the DMV. And they add about $281 million to our local economy. So we're still making important additions, even all these years later, with things like the opening of Crossvines this summer. It's meant to serve the public with a bistro and event space, but also to help cultivate what I believe is going to be a growing wine industry. There's no reason that we will not replicate the wine industry that Northern Virginia became famous for. And we're on the track to do that here. And our facility at Crossvines is meant to actually stimulate wine production from farmers and help them get over the hurdle of affording equipment, particularly for their initial production of wine. We provide a facility that's properly equipped so they can actually produce wine out of the grapes they're growing. And this is, all a big effort to help our local farmers keep down their costs while they learn how to produce high quality and excellent wines. And we do have some really good producers in the county now. Earlier this summer, I invited Visit Montgomery leaders to this media briefing and encouraged everyone to visit the Ag Reserve. The Ag Fair gives everyone an opportunity to head to Gaithersburg and see the best of what the Ag Reserve produces, all in one spot. So please enjoy the fair before it ends, Saturday, August 19th. On a sad note, I also want to note the passing of Dr. Lonnie Luther. He served as president of Montgomery County Farm Bureau. He was a strong advocate for Montgomery County farmers. He was a leader our farmers could count on. And in his background, he actually worked at I think it was FDA, but he was a scientist before he was a farmer and played an important role in the county. So I just want to thank him for all he did and let his family know that all of us appreciated Lonnie and his input and the insight he provided to farming activities in Montgomery County and to how the county itself worked with farmers. Our thoughts and condolences with the family and the Farm Bureau, as well as those in the agricultural community who he worked with over the years. We talked a little bit earlier about climate change, and obviously you all probably painfully aware about the fires in Maui. I want to pass along well wishes to 2 members of our Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Service and the Maryland Task Force 1 team who are in Hawaii now. Alan Rossi and John Gilkey are leading their dogs, First and Piper, through the damage from wildfires Around 100 people have been killed so far, but recovery operations will continue. People are still missing, and FEMA's on the scene providing temporary shelter and volunteers. And everybody's doing everything they can to bring comfort to those who lost loved ones and lost their homes to wildfires. I myself was kind of amazed by the speed with which these fires spread and the seeming lack of warning and the surprise that so many people expressed who escaped from the fires. And I know there's going to be a lot of tension put on how the state responded to the fires, and are there lessons to be learned about how to make sure people are warned properly and actually can get out of the way of the fire. If they can't save their houses, they can at least save themselves. Massive deadly wildfires are actually happening at a much higher frequency. We've already experienced the wildfires that are ongoing in Canada. They had major wildfires in Greece, and it's why I'm convinced that wide-scale changes have to be made soon to decelerate the impact that greenhouse gases are having on the earth. And extreme weather events have gone from once-in-a-generation events to pretty much monthly occurrences. And it's devastating and it's life-changing. I hope our rescue crews are successful in helping those who've lost so much find some peace. And finally, with the health report, we're just under 2 weeks away from the beginning of the school. It's very important that our parents make sure that their children have the proper shots and immunizations needed to attend school. Our HHS teams have been working with MCPS to ensure that all students and families are aware of the requirements and providing access to receive them if they're needed. There are shots your child has to have before they're going to be allowed to go back to school. So make sure your kids are up to date on the shots. Our COVID numbers continue to slightly increase. Everyone seems to be noticing family, friends, or co-workers with recent COVID infections. I've seen it among people I work with and know this is happening across the nation, not just here in Maryland. The good news is we have yet to see dramatic increases in serious illnesses or deaths. I'm glad that our HHS team and our county continually monitor COVID, and we report this out weekly to you in these briefings. Our society and the media is moving away from this virus, and as if it's gone. It's not actually gone. It certainly kills more people than the flu kills, and so it just remains a real threat to life. But fortunately, we know that if people remain boosted, there's no need for anybody to really die anymore. So hopefully people will do the right thing and take care of themselves. But it's still in our community, and we're going to continue to focus on it as long as we have to deal with it here, particularly as we have to deal with it in its current form. Our new booster is expected here in just over a month. It's going to be a challenge for all of us to refocus efforts to get people reboosted. Last fall, a few of our residents came out for the COVID booster shot that we normally see for the annual flu shot, even though COVID remains more serious and more deadly than the flu. Keep that in mind. If we're getting flu shots, we ought to be getting these shots as well. And we'd like our residents to get both shots this year. And this is certainly, if nothing else, going to reduce serious illnesses in the county. I'm going to turn this over now to Sean O'Donnell to continue on the health report, and we'll get back to questions after that.
Thank you, County Executive. So as our County Executive just shared with you, we are tracking on the variants. That one in the orange at the top there, EG5, I believe is come to be nicknamed Eris. That's the one, that's the variant of note that is starting to increase not only in our area, but this is the United States variant typing. So it is causing, it looks like more transmissions, but not significantly more serious illness. We have seen our hospitalizations go up a little bit. We've seen our wastewater surveillance show some increased COVID activity. And then we've seen across the state that test positivity is inching upward. And you can see here, the upper right, I've circled Montgomery County there to make it a little bit easier, but you can see almost all of the counties have shown some gradually increasing test positivity. And on the left is the case rates by county. Those are the daily case rates averaged over 7 days. We usually report that number, the weekly number, so it would be that number times 7. So we've seen all of these. Many of the counties were below 1 a few weeks ago, and now most of them are over 1. Within our hospitals in the county, again, the number of people hospitalized with a COVID diagnosis is a bit higher than double than where we were a few weeks back, but these are still much smaller numbers compared to what we've seen with other waves. So we're hoping that this is more of a wavelet than a significant wave as we've had prior summers. Looking across our state hospital beds, you can see those numbers were elevated to about the 125 range and is held. These are the daily numbers. So it held around that range for about a week and a half. We've seen the last 2 days with some increases in hospital beds. But the red numbers on the bottom, those are ICU beds. And you can see there's not been a significant change in the number of patients with a COVID diagnosis in the ICU beds. We have not seen an increase in our volume of emergency department visits. And again, I'm sharing the death totals from COVID, as our county executive mentioned. In comparison to influenza, this continues to be much higher levels. You don't see numbers for Montgomery County over the last few months, with the exception of June. Most of our death totals for COVID have been below 10. But if you look at just the Maryland numbers from October through the date through the most recent reports, that's over 1,400 deaths across the state of Maryland with a COVID diagnosis since last October. We're starting to follow the flu activity. In that same time period, there's been 69 deaths from influenza across the state. So you can see still significantly more serious outcomes happening with COVID. Again, we're reporting not as significant a wave currently happening, but we're monitoring in case things do get worse. At this time, I'd like to see if Dr. Davis or Dr. Bridgers or Dr. Stoddard have any additional reports from public health.
Nothing from me, Mr. O'Donnell.
Oh, thank you, Mr. O'Donnell.
No, we're good for questions.
All right, at this time, we will open up the floor for questions. As a reminder, please raise your hand. I will pivot it back over to Tom. Okay. Kelly from JLA, take it away.
Thank you so much. Mr. Elrich, parents are concerned today about this firm that was hired to do the investigation into the sexual harassment allegations against Dr. Joel Beedelman. They're concerned that the school system has done business with this firm in the past and that it does not represent an independent investigation. Would you be willing to push for an independent investigation done by a firm outside of the county that has not previously done business with the county?
So this is the first I've heard this. I mean, when I saw the firm's name, but didn't ring any bells for me as someone, that they'd had a lot of business with. But I don't have any problem with an independent investigation. And they still have to find the right firm. And that might take more, they probably picked somebody they thought they could get to work quickly on it. Finding another firm would probably take a little bit of research time, but if people have some patience for soliciting, different firms and getting proposals for them, I don't have any problem with having an independent firm do it. I understand if the companies work closely with the school system, having concerns about whether or not they should be investigating the school system, because this is essentially an investigation of the system. If all it is a review of the one particular incident, that's one thing. But if you're asking them to go any deeper than that to make sure this is not systemic, you might want a more independent group.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to go over to Tom Ruzi. Go ahead.
Hi,
Hey,
Mr. Elrich. I had two questions. The first one is there's the former GOP chair in Montgomery County, Rudin Sullivan, is forming this committee to try to term limit the county executive to 2 terms instead of 3. And just wanted to see if you had any opinion on if you would support that, oppose that, or what you think of that.
that's kind of a rhetorical question. Look, I don't believe in term limits anyway. But, you know, the voters voted to put in term limits at 3. I've never asked to, you know, go above that number. I never thought, you know, I was at peace with the decision that voters made, you know, before this ever affected me as county executive. I think it's interesting, the Republican Party, so if they can't win, I guess the idea is to try to make sure they can take out a Democrat. I'll point out, if you look how many votes I got in general elections, I probably have 2 of the highest vote counts in an election and 2nd highest percentage ever. So I guess if they figure they can't take me out with an actual real election by a real candidate, see if they can knock me out with this. But I think it's bad for politics. I wouldn't do this to a Republican. I mean, if voters want to elect somebody, they should be able to elect who they want. And if the primary doesn't sort it out, then you sort it out in the general. But to take away voters' choices by doing this is something that's, I think, is fundamentally undemocratic.
And one of the reasons he gives is he says, well, you know, it's obviously partially an attack on you, but saying, you know, businesses are choosing Northern Virginia over Montgomery County because we're overtaxed, we're overregulated. What do you think of that?
I'd use the word dishonest because I don't want to use the other word for the same thing. Look, Montgomery County, if you look at our tax rates, I'll give you examples. Fairfax County's combined tax rate on commercial property gets around to about $1.60 in Tyson's Corner. Montgomery County's tax rate after all this is going to be a little over $1. DC government does an ongoing study every 2 years on comparative tax rates in the region, because DC does it because they want to see where DC compares to everybody else in the region. The lowest jurisdiction for business taxes is Montgomery County. The second lowest jurisdiction on residential taxes is Montgomery County. DC is lower than us, but there's a reason why DC is lower than us. Their residential rate is 85 cents. So they beat us by about, this year be about by about 17 cents. Last year would have been 14 cents. DC's commercial top property tax rate is $1.85. So they raise off the commercial sector a ton more money, which allows them to have lower tax rates on the residential sector. We're stuck with a combined rate that's the same on commercial as it is on residential. In the 3 Northern Virginia counties, and I'm sure about this number in Fairfax, not only is their tax rate higher than Montgomery County's, but all commercial property pays 12.5 cents on their tax rate additional. And all that money goes into transportation. In Northern Virginia, 0.7 cents on the sales tax goes into transportation for Fairfax County. And in the special taxing districts like Tyson's Corner, taxes, combined special district taxes are somewhere around 40 cents on top of a base rate. So you're looking at rates that are far ahead. Sully doesn't know what he's talking about. And all he's doing is repeating, you know, this kind of trope that Montgomery County is this horribly overtaxed place. It's just flat out not true. You know, and you're welcome. We're welcome to share our information with you. You can pull up the DC report. This is not our imagination. And it's actually crippled us because Fairfax County, frankly, because they tax more, they're able to build more projects. So they're able to build the Silver Line. They have enough revenue coming in to build infrastructure. Montgomery County's tax rate is so low that we're not even able to fully fund our schools, let alone take on major infrastructure projects. So what we've done to ourselves is actually handicapped ourselves against Virginia. And so it drives me crazy when I hear people say that. The worst people is when I hear a developer who I know has got a project in Fairfax County telling me how bad my taxes are. And it's like, oh, by the way, how's it work in Virginia? And the last thing I forgot to say, Virginia has something Montgomery, we have no tax on businesses in Montgomery County other than property tax. And we do not get any piggyback tax off of state income taxes on businesses. Virginia has a BPOL tax, which goes up to 3% of gross receipts on every commercial business in Northern Virginia, in Fairfax County. So if you're an accountant working part-time from home, you're paying a BPOL tax. And that tax is higher than the county's energy tax, because somebody will come back and say, well, Montgomery County has a higher energy tax. Yes, we do. But they've got this tax solely on the business community that's bigger than our tax. So Sully ought to actually learn some math and pay attention to what the statistics are.
Thanks, County Executive.
All right, we'll have Scott Broom. Take it away, Scott.
Enjoyed that educational moment, Mr. County Executive. I've been assigned a report on this neighborhood, Rock Creek Manor, and an issue about sidewalks and trees and resistance to that. Notably, the neighbors requested a temporary restraining order from a judge last week, and yesterday the judge denied the order, which provides the opportunity for the Department of Transportation to continue with the project, which their public information officer says they're planning to get started on Thursday. So all that said, I think you already know all that, but as a preamble, could you just share some of your thoughts about whether or not you feel like this should continue over the apparent resistance there? And if not, why not?
So I think the issues underlying have been largely resolved. The DOT worked with the property owners. And I will say this marked the kind of change in our approach to things. I mean, there are a number of road or sidewalk projects where the kind of the assumption is we're going to go in, we're going to slay all the trees, build a straight sidewalk and everything will be fine. They went back and they worked with individual homeowners and determined, which trees the owners felt comfortable taking down, and where they didn't feel comfortable taking their trees down, we're not taking them down. So the sidewalk, instead of being a dead straight line, will probably have an occasional curve in it, but it'll accommodate protection as many trees as possible. I frankly would prefer to cut down as few trees as possible. We've done a project in Montgomery County where we actually took space along a roadway and separated that with those little flex poles and things to separate enough of a walking path, because we didn't want to go into the yards and cut down trees. I think we need to look at doing more of that. We don't necessarily need to add pavement. We can carve out spaces on a lot of these local roads that don't involve going into the trees, and we've got to be more sensitive about what we do and when we're going into people's yards. So we will not be taking anybody's trees who doesn't think their trees should be removed.
On follow-up, the more activist neighbors have asked the Inspector General to look into how different funds were allocated on this and suggesting potential improprieties. The IG has gotten back to them and said that they are working on that, which was sort of part of the TRO complaint, let them finish their investigation and that. Yeah. Regardless, at this point, do you view this issue after the temporary restraining order was unsuccessful? Do you view this issue as settled? It's just time to move on and build this project?
Well, I think I would only say that because the department changed what it was going to build. I mean, their objections were to a plan that I objected to. So, they don't always come to me and say, here's our design of the sidewalk. This is what we're going to do. It's sort of like the normal course of putting in sidewalks. I had concerns about it when I saw it originally, and the neighbors obviously raised concerns, and they went about working with the neighbors. They feel like they've reached the point with the community that no one's going to get a tree in their yard cut that they don't want cut, and that to me is a good resolution. And I heard that some of the neighbors felt that the trees were nearing end of their lives. They had trees that had dead limbs on them, And we're planting 3 trees for every tree we take down. So this will not be a deforestation. We're going to be replacing so they get tree cover to grow back to replace the trees that are coming down. I actually thought this was a pretty good resolution. I think our department learned that in going forward with these kind of projects, the goal is to, if we need a sidewalk, to figure out how we minimize the damage before we just go ahead and say we're taking this swath and the sidewalk will be here too bad.
I mean, I'm sure there are others who want to ask questions, but just
Yeah.
FYI, the one individual I spoke with who had a tree taken down last week was clearly not happy about it. So I'm not quite sure the communication about, consent on trees may have reached that individual. But regardless of that, I think it's probably my time to move on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, Scott. We will move it on now to Nicole Ashbury.
Hi, County Executive. This is Nicole
Hey.
Asbury with the Post. I had a few quick questions for you on the principal sort of end. I know you elaborated a little more on sort of the county governance powers in this situation, but I wanted to ask you a little more directly in terms of what kind of oversight can county governance have over MCPS's handling of the investigation? And do you have, is there any authority to order an overhaul of MCPS's bullying and harassment reporting policy? So that's the first question for you.
No, we have no power. How's this work? The school board's elected by the voters. They pick a superintendent. The school system is actually a creature of the state, even though it's funded largely with county money. And there's a state school board that's over the county school board and a state superintendent that's over everybody. The county has no authority. We can't even, for example, look at a budget line item and say, we don't think you should do that program. We're not going to fund that program, and we want you to fund a different program. The county has no ability to do that. We're restricted to giving the school system the same amount of money that it had last year, adjusted for population growth and inflation. That's our whopping authority over this. And that's a big discussion that the council's having and I'm having as well, and other county executives around the state, is what would be a more appropriate level of oversight for local government, because we provide all this money and wind up with zero oversight over anything. So I can comment, I can say, I think you ought to, they ought to bring in an independent investigator. I could say, I think you ought to, you need to revamp your bullying policy. But basically, all I get is a bully pulpit, so to speak, in saying that, but we have no authority. And I served on a council where we actually tried to direct how they would spend some money, and they just thumbed their nose at the council and did what they were going to do anyway. So we do not have a truly cooperative, interactive relationship at this point, but nobody does. Montgomery County's not unique. You'll find these kind of arguments all around the state between county governments and their local school boards, because we are powerless, and yet we are sort of like we're like a money machine, but we have no power on how the money gets tapped at some point.
Understood. And then another kind of follow-up that I had for you in particular was, with this investigation that's ongoing, I was curious if you think that it is most appropriate sort of for the investigation to be handled by someone hired by the school system, or if there's another entity perhaps that you think should be taking the lead on handling a lot of this.
Well, there's no other entity to go to unless the state were to step in and say, we want an investigation, which would be nice since they supervise the school system, and agree to pay for the investigation. If the county pays for it, it's just, it's another expense out of our pocket. The school system already has over $3 billion of county money. I'd kind of prefer that their money gets spent on it rather than another hit on the county budget to pay for it. But if they went, I'd prefer somebody, if they go outside the system, at least you get somebody with that experience with the school system, it could be looked at as neutral. Or you could get the state IG could take a look at it. There are other people who could do this.
Thank you.
I would not be averse to anybody else doing this.
All right, thank you for that question. We'll move it on to Ginny.
Hi, yes, thank you. I just have a question, either for Dr. Stoddard, Dr. Davis, Mr. O'Donnell, anybody can kind of air, Dr. Bridgers, just whoever's most suited to answer this. With the uptick in COVID numbers, does the county have a specific response or guidance for the community about how to move forward with precautions at this time?
Thank you, Jenny. I think it's really doing due diligence and being vigilant. I think the thing that is reassuring is that we have a lot more tools in our toolbox than we did previously, but people should take precautions. If you have the sniffles, you should take a COVID test and respond accordingly. If you do test positive for COVID, you should stay away from other folks for 5 days, wear a mask if you're out in public. Those things that we were doing before in terms of washing your hands and taking precautions, and especially looking out for those folks who are vulnerable. So if you're immunocompromised or our seniors, making sure that they are taking precautions. If you're going to be have young kids who might be sick, and if you're going to be visiting the grandparents, maybe take a COVID test before you go. The new COVID vaccines won't be out and available probably until September, October. And so once they're available, we want to make sure that folks are getting their booster. If folks do have COVID symptoms, one of the benefits of taking one of those home tests early, especially if somebody has comorbid conditions, is that we do have good treatment. So Paxlovid is still effective for the strain that is circulating now. And so if someone has hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, or is older and test positive for COVID, we do encourage you to talk to your doctor and potentially getting Paxlovid to help with symptoms. And so we do have good treatments available for COVID, and we want folks to be taking those preventive cautions as well.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'm going to ask if anyone else has additional questions. Please raise your hand. Any other questions? Last chance. Okay. With that being said, thank you so much for joining us on this week's media briefing. We'll see you next time.
Thank you all.